Wanderers, the Lunging Strike dual basic skill Barbarian has been absolutely insane. I've been playing this since day one. I've already cleared pit 107. We had plenty of time left. We're going to bump right up to pit 110 and then keep on going. Now, that is just a pit pushing variant. We're not going to cover that today. It will be in the planner. But if you do want to keep a lookout for what the variant is going to be, make sure you follow and subscribe to the channel. Now, we're not going to cover the pit pushing variant. Now, the variant we're going to cover will clear pit 100 without any mythics. But this one will be a lot better for your open world content and farming your gear. We're at the very beginning of the season, so we want to make sure that farming is the main priority, not pit pushing. So we're going to cover that variant today, and I'm going to show you even on Torment 4 bosses how this does. This right here is Belial on Torment 4. Now, Belial, with the way that these work, he gets double the life with the barriers. Now, I know what you're going to say. That seemed a little slow. I'm sure that there are some builds out there that are absolutely smashing things. We'll make just a slight change, and then you just watch the damage fly way up. Now, we'll cover all of that and more in the video. Now, normally I would show a pit run, but this is already a long video, so I'm going to put the pit run in the description of the video. So if you want to see what this build looks like when it's out farming pits, or what it feels like when you're actually going to be playing it, make sure you check out the description of the video where all of the links that you're going to need for this build are going to be. So let's hop into the skill tree. Now, like I said, this is going to be a dual basic skill build. Lunging Strike is going to be your primary. Lunging Strike does a lot more damage than all of the other basic skills, and we'll talk about why when we get into the gear. We're going to put 5 points into Lunging Strike, and we're going to go all the way down through Battle Lunging Strike. This is going to give Lunging Strike some bleed, which is going to be very important for this build. We're going to go 1 point into Frenzy all the way down through Battle Frenzy. That's going to give us some additional attack speed whenever we're berserking. That's going to be really important for this build because we're going to be berserking all of the time. When you use Frenzy, you'll see a little timer above it and some numbers. That is going to be some buffs. Every time that you attack with Frenzy, you can get up to a maximum stack of Frenzy. You're going to have more attack speed. 1 point in a pressure point so that we can unlock Warpath. Every time that we overpower, which this will be an overpower build, you're going to deal additional damage. We're going to be going into Tempered Fury here to max it out. This is going to be a max resource build. There's several abilities in this build that will scale off of that max fury, so that's why we want to be stacking it. We're going to be going into Ground Stomp here, all the way down through Strategic Ground Stomp. This is just going to help reset the cooldowns of our ultimate skill. Now, the cooldowns, especially when you're going to be pushing the pits, are insane, but when you're out in the open world, it does help having this on there. We're going to be putting 3 points into Imposing Presence for some additional maximum life. Then we're going to put 3 points into Martial Vigor for some damage reduction against elite monsters. We're going to be taking Rallying Cry all the way down through Tactical Rallying Cry. This is going to give us 20 Fury every single time that we cast Rallying Cry, as well as some additional maximum resource generation. This is incredibly important because we're always going to be spending Fury. There will be some times where you may run out because the Fury drain, and we'll talk about that in the gear section. But every time you cast Rallying Cry now, you will gain enough Fury to start attacking. 3 points into Belligerence. This is going to give us some additional damage whenever we use basic skill. 1 point into Outburst. We do need Thorns, but we'll talk about that when we get into the Paragon Board. Challenging Shout all the way down through Enhanced Challenging Shout. This is going to be a great source of damage reduction as well as some maximum life. We're going to be taking Booming Voice here for some additional uptime on our shouts. 2 points into Raid Leader. This is going to heal not just our allies, but us as well. 3 points into Aggressive Resistance. This will give us some damage reduction while we're berserking, and we will be berserking 100% of the time, and we'll talk about that when we get to the bottom of the skill tree. 3 points into Pit Fighter. This is going to give us some damage to close enemies, as well as some damage reduction. 3 points into Slaying Strikes. This is going to give us some additional damage to injured and healthy enemies. Injured is anything below 35% life, and then healthy enemies is anything above 80% life. 1 point into Thick Skin, so we can unlock Counteroffensive. This is going to give us some additional damage when our Fortify is above 50% of our maximum life. Then we're going to be taking Heavy Handed. Now we're going to be using a two-handed mace setup for this build. We'll explain exactly why we're going to be doing that with a Lunging Strike build when we get into the gear. But this is going to give us some additional damage when we're using a two-handed weapon. Then we're also going to be taking Wallop here. This is going to give us some additional damage when we're using a bludgeoning weapon, which your mace is a bludgeoning weapon. We're going to be maxing out your Invigorating Fury here. This is going to be incredibly important for the build because we are going to be constantly sitting at half life, and we're also going to be constantly spending Fury. Now, every time that we spend 100 Fury, we're going to heal ourselves for 24% of our maximum life. And because we're always at half life, we'll always be healing. It's going to be this crazy back and forth, and we'll talk about that more in the gear section. We're going to be maxing out Wrath of Berserker here, all the way down through Supreme Wrath of Berserker. We're going to gain up to 100% increase to your normal Berserking bonus. We're going to have Unstoppable up all the time. We're going to be proccing Pain Gorgers, which we'll talk about in just a second. And we're also going to have your Berserking up. Now, because we're going to be taking Unconstrained, this is going to be a half-life build, and we'll talk about that in the seasonal perks. We will always be sitting in half-life, which sounds kind of scary, but because of the way the build is set up, we're actually going to have quite a lot of life, so it really won't feel as bad as it sounds. Because we're going to be below healthy, which is 80% life, we will always be berserking, and we're always going to have 30% additional damage reduction to physical damage. Now, there is one floating point that will leave up to you what you want to do. We can go into something like defensive stance, you can go into guttural yell, or you can simply just max out raid leader to get 3% of your maximum heals. That's going to be completely up to you. You can follow along with the planner. It'll be in the description of the video, and that is absolutely 100% the best way to do it. I've been updating the planner live. People have been popping in, asking questions. I've been learning a lot as we've been playing in the season. So the planner is 100% up to date. So make sure you follow along with that planner to see what the best option is for your skills. If you've never seen a planner before, this is going to be it right here. This will list all of the skills. Now make sure that you check the different variants. This starts from the very beginning of your journey, your legendary, then when you start getting uniques, then when you start getting mythics or chaos armor, and your pit pushing variant. Now this one has some very specific breakpoints you're going to need, so this is for later on. It's going to have your Paragon board, your skill tree. We'll have a complete breakdown and explanation of how the build is going to run, including fury management issues. And as I change things, I will keep a complete updated change log here so you can see what is getting changed when as we play it live. So that's your skill tree. Let's take a look at the Paragon board here. In your starter board, we're going to be running Wrath. Now, we do want to maintain maximum fury as best as we can whenever we critically strike, which will be basically all the time with the way that the build is going to get set up eventually in the end game. This is going to give us some maximum fury. The extra additive critical strike damage is going to help, but is not going to be a make or break. We'll also get a pretty big critical strike damage increase from the legendary power on this glyph as well. In the next board here, we're going to be running Warbringer. This is going to give us some Fortify. Now, you saw that we weren't taking the Fortify node in Rallying Cry, so having Warbringer here is going to help remedy that. Then we're also going to be taking Martial. Whenever we use a shout skill, it's going to reset the cooldown of our other skills. So that's going to be Ground Stomp. It's also going to be Wrath of Berserker. This is just a way to get a little bit more cooldown when you're out in the open world. Now, eventually you probably will switch this out for something like Ire because you have enough cooldown, or you're just pit pushing and you don't really need that. The next board that we're going to be going into is going to be your Blood Rage. Really, the only thing that you need out of this is that you're going to get 45% increase in damage while berserking, because you saw we are berserking 100% of the time because of the way that your key passive is going to be working. In that board, we're going to be running Challenger. This is going to increase your normal nodes. Now you can see we get 9 strength here instead of your normal 5. We're also going to get additional damage against elites, as well as the legendary bonus, which is going to give us some more damage to elites. The next board we're going to be taking is going to be Carnage. We're going to be berserking 100% of the time, so we will get additional attack speed and 30% increased damage to fire and physical damage, which is what the Barbarian does. Inside of that board, we're going to be running Crusher, because we're running a two-handed mace. This is going to give us 20% increased overpowered damage. It's also going to give us some extra increased damage for the legendary power here. For the final board, we're going to be running Decimator. We're going to deal increased damage to vulnerable enemies and increase overpowered damage as well. Now, we're going to be getting vulnerable damage with this build from our runes. If you do not have the expansion pack and you don't have runes, then you can swap one of these glyphs out for Exploit. That will be the only really good option for you, or change around one of the affixes on your ring to chance to make enemies vulnerable. Inside of this board here, we're going to be running Revenge. This is where we needed those Thorns damage that we put into Outbursts. Whenever we deal Thorns damage to an enemy, we're going to deal up to 15% increased damage for 10 seconds. Now that's going to refresh every time. So for bosses, this is something that will maybe stack up a little bit slower depending on how often they hit you. This also is going to give us an increase to our regular damage. We're going to take a look at the gear. In the planner, there is going to be different variants, so if you do not have all the Chaos Armor, that is perfectly fine. I hit Torment 4 on day 1 at Paragon 125, so this build definitely works, and it will absolutely get you there without having any of the Chaos Armor. But because this is the Season of Chaos, we're going to be covering the Chaos Armor. We're going to be running the Rage of Haragoth. The big benefit to this is that inflicting bleed on an enemy has up to a 72% chance to reduce the cooldowns of your skills by 1 second. That's where a lot of the cooldown reduction that we get comes from. Your Lunging Strike is going to apply bleed. If you do proc a lucky hit chance with Lunging Strike, then you have a 72% chance after that to proc that 1 second cooldown. We're going to be running Pain Gorgers here. This is incredibly important to the build. Anytime that we deal damage with a non-basic skill to enemies, we're going to mark them for 3 seconds. And in the gameplay loop, I'll show you what that looks like. When a basic skill first hits a marked enemy, that basic skill is going to be echoed to all marked enemies, and then it's going to increase the damage that we do to them. Now, we're going to have 3 different ways of spreading Pain Gorgers. One is going to be Ground Stomp, because whenever we hit an enemy with something that's not a basic skill, Ground Stomp's one of those. Wrath of Berserker at the tier 5 is also going to deal damage, so that will pull enemies in and spread Pain Gorgers. And then we're also going to be running Wolves, and Wolves are going to be runes, which we'll talk about that later on in the video, but they will also spread your Pain Gorgers. So this is incredibly important for the build here, because without this, you do not do quite as much damage. If you're just leveling up, even a 750 piece of gear that is a Pain Gorgers Gauntlet with a really high percentage on the aspect is incredibly important, and definitely put it on. That goes for most of the uniques in the build. If you find something during the leveling process that is 750, but it is one of the uniques for the build, it is way more important to wear those over putting on something that's legendary unless you absolutely need it to stay alive. For the gloves here, we're going to be running the Crown of Lucian. Now, this is going to give us up to a 90x increased damage, which is really big, and some cooldown reduction along with some lucky hit chance. Now, we need lucky hit chance to proc your Rage of Haragoth. A big disclaimer, and this is also inside of the planner, you can find the Chaos Armor in any combination. It doesn't have to be your Crown of Lucian specifically on your gloves. It can be Crown of Lucian in any of those spots, as long as you find the right combination of pieces of gear. So that's all I've been doing, is just hunting for gear that I can put in and fill into this puzzle. It's been a ton of fun to do. Now, we're going to be looking at Battle Trance here on the pants. This is an incredibly awesome piece of armor that we get to put from our amulet onto the pants. Now, the reason that this is great, 30% increase to all resistances. Now, this solves your resistance problem by quite a bit. I was capped without having this on. This just makes it so that I can move some things around and I can take some points out of the Paragon board and put them into something maybe a little bit more offensive. On top of that, on a lucky hit chance, we have a 20% chance to gain a stack of Frenzy. The best part about that, we don't even have to have Frenzy on the bar. Now, for this setup, we do. Eventually, when you get into the endgame variant and you're going to be pit pushing, we won't have Frenzy on the bar anymore, but we still get to take advantage of this here. Whenever we're at maximum stacks of Frenzy, that's all is going to happen automatically. We're going to deal 72% increased damage, and all of our other skills, which is going to be Lunging Strike, is going to gain increased attack speed and a whole lot of it. For the boots, we're going to be running Hooves of the Mountain God. These are incredibly important for this build. This will make your basic skills cleave. Now they'll hit additional targets in front of them. This is why your Fury is going to drain, and this is the question I get asked all the time. Why is my Fury constantly draining? I can never get back enough Fury to attack. This is it, but this is only the first part of it. Once you get to maximum Fury, your Fury will start to drain. Now that can only go up to a maximum of 40 Fury per second that is draining, which you can actually counteract and have more Fury generation than that 40 per second, so you will not actually lose Fury. Now, you gain Fury by hitting monsters with a basic skill, which we're going to be using a couple of them. They will eventually start spending Fury, and we'll talk about that in a second. You can also get Fury by taking damage, and we have a ton of Fury generation in the build, so that means that our normal hits that would generate Fury will actually generate a lot more Fury. If you don't have enough Fury to sustain that 40 per second, it will eventually go back down to 0, and then you will not have that 40 per second drain, and then you can just regenerate your Fury by using Rallying Cry in order to generate some Fury to start with. Now, if you look here, I'm already sitting at max. It's draining a little bit, but it's not going all the way back up, but it's not going all the way back down. And that is going to be because we're going to have some Fury per second here. If you have a GA on this, it goes even higher. So you're going to eventually, when you get some gear that is going to work for this build, you'll be able to counteract that Fury loss all the time. For the weapon, we're going to be running Earthquakes. Now, it does say something about Ground Stomp. You can completely ignore that. There are variants in the planner that do not run Ground Stomp. The most important part of this is that we're going to be standing in an Earthquake, and when we do stand in an Earthquake, we're going to deal up to 120% increased damage. On top of that, whenever we leave that Earthquake, we maintain that buff for 4 seconds. For the affixes here, we're going to be running strength, max life, critical strike damage, and for your tempers, you can run damage while Wrath of Berserker is active. I did not get that on this and I ran out of attempts. But then you are also going to be running chance for Lunging Strike to deal double damage. This is the only basic skill that has chance for dealing double damage. That's why we're using this as our main skill alongside of the other basic skills that are going to be used in the different variants in this build. Lunging Strike is going to hit the hardest. That's why we use it. For your other weapon, we're going to be running the Ramaladi's Magnum Opus. Now, this right here was changed. It does still say skills using this weapon deal damage. It was confirmed that this will affect all of your abilities no matter what weapon type and weapon selection you're using. That means we can use a two-handed mace and still take advantage of the 0.5% increase in damage per point of fury that we have. Now, what does that mean? I have 290 fury. That means that we take half of that, and that is going to be a multiplier to our damage. It is really, really big. So on these, again, the most important part of this is going to be the aspect. You want as close to 50% as you possibly can. That's going to be the most important part. The GAs do not matter quite as much as that aspect for it. This is also going to start draining your maximum fury. So on top of your fury drain from your boots, we're getting more fury drain here. And unfortunately, when we go into the Shard of Wrathiel, we get additional fury cost to your basic skills. Basic skills will now deal additional damage, but they are going to also cost 25 primary resources. So look through the planner at the fury management section so that you know what's going to fit your specific build the best in order to maintain fury. Now, getting up to that 150% is going to be incredibly important. It's more important than the GAs. So make sure you follow along with the planner to get all of the masterworking and all of the information that you need for the build. For the polearms, we're going to be running Moonrise here. When we attack 5 times, we're going to gain increased attack speed. Then we're going to gain up to a 120% increase to basic damage, 15% movement speed. This is a really great buff that lasts for 10 seconds. Then when we attack 5 times again, we get that buff back. For the affixes here, we're going to be running strength, max life, and you want critical strike damage here. We're going to have either damage while Wrath of the Berserker is active or critical strike damage. The benefits to having critical strike damage is if you don't have 100% uptime on Wrath of the Berserker, because you're running around the open world, you won't really take advantage of that affix. Critical strike damage will be on all the time. So you can play around with what you want. If you're pushing pits all the time and that's where you're at in your journey, then maybe you want to run with the Wrath of Berserker damage. And for the final temper, we're going to be running Belligerence. This is going to give us some basic skill damage. For the ring, we're going to be running Vehement Brawler. This is going to increase the cooldown of our Wrath of Berserker because it's going to give it more ranks. It also gives us up to 30% increased damage whenever we use an ultimate skill. For the affixes here, we're going to be running max life, or you can go with strength depending on how tanky you feel, attack speed, and then either overpower damage, critical strike damage, whichever additive damage you feel you're going to be using the most. Once you get into the pit pushing variant, overpower damage might be your best choice. Then we're going to be running Wrath of the Berserker cooldown, and again, the same thing with the additive damage. You're going to pick which one you want. For the other ring, we're going to be running Starlight. Now, this is the fun combination that will help keep you healed and also help keep your fury at max. You're going to gain 40% of your primary resources for every 20% of your life that you heal, or every 120% of your life that you overheal, well at maximum life, up to 300 resources per second. Now, here's the kicker for this. We will never be at maximum life, so all we have to do is heal for 20% of our life. When we looked at what our Invigorating Fury was at, every single time that we spend 100 Fury, we will heal for 24% of our maximum life. That means every 100 Fury, we're going to gain back 45 of our maximum Fury. So now, as we spend Fury, like you saw we're doing right now because of our boots, we're going to be spending Fury. That spending Fury is also going to heal us, and now that healing us is also going to regen our Fury back. It is a very cool combination, and it will help with your Fury management issues with this build, and will allow you to constantly just regenerate all of your Fury and some maximum life. For the affixes here, I actually think that I'm in a really good spot, and I could probably remove the cold, but make sure that while you're in the leveling process, you prioritize your resistances. That's why I went for strength, max life, and cold resistance. And now I can re-roll that for something like attack speed or critical strike damage to gain some more damage out of that. And for the tempers here, we're going to be running Wrath of Berserker cooldown reduction, and then again, go with the additive damage number that you feel is going to be the best. For your amulet here, we're going to be running Adaptability. Now, this cannot move from the amulet. We cannot replace this with anything else because this is an absolutely massive damage increase. It's going to take 0.9% of your maximum resources up to 500, which we do not have 500, and give you 0.9% of that as damage. Now we're running 290 maximum fury, so we're going to gain almost 290% increased damage just by having this on an amulet. It is insane. It also is going to help with your fury issues because we're going to be generate additional primary resources with your basic skill. For the affixes here, we're going to be running strength. Eventually, this will not be cooldown reduction. This will be ranks to brute force and heavy-handed. And then for your tempers here, we're going to be running invigorating fury and then wrath of the berserker cooldown reduction. So that's the gear. Let's take a look at your expertise. The expertise we're going to be running is two-handed axe. Now, you do not have to be running a two-handed axe to take advantage of this. This is going to be an extra buff on top of whatever arsenal selection you're using, which we're going to be using a two-handed mace. We still gain that 10% increased damage to vulnerable enemies by using the two-handed mace. Then for your mercenaries here, until you get enough resistances or enough armor, we're going to be running right here. This is going to give us 15% to all resistances, which is really, really handy early on in the stages. And then it's also going to give us a 15x increase to damage. This is going to happen once every 11 seconds here, and that's going to last for 6 seconds. So it's actually a really great increase to your damage. For your reinforcement, we're going to be running Aldkin. The reason that we're running this is that Field of Languish gives us 20% damage reduction to any enemy that is inside of that radius. So we want to make sure that we're going to be reducing the amount of damage because we're going to be running at half life. The reason that we're going to be running at half life is because our seasonal perks. Now, originally, we had this slated to be running a Beast Cornered. The way that this worked is that for any missing life that we had, we were going to gain 20% increased damage and damage reduction. Because you were always missing life, this is what you were going to be paired with it. Now, it also spending resources was going to drain a percentage of your life. It was equal to 30% of your maximum resources, and then it was going to give those resources back to you. Currently, if you spend 100 fury, it is going to take 30% of your total life. It will not take you below 10% life, but that basically means that because of how fast we spend fury, you will spend the entire time at 10% life, and that is not a lot of fun. It is very easy to die. So we're going to be running your Brawn over Brains. You'll do slightly less damage with this variant because we're not going to overpower 100% of the time. It's going to be every couple hits. In the final pit pushing variant, which we'll have a guide coming out for, you're going to take advantage of that 120% overpowered damage every single hit. So this is actually going to be a better option for you later on. So we might as well just be using it now and not really die because it gives us that huge increase to maximum life. When we're at half-life, we're actually only sitting at 22,000 life, which still feels incredibly tanky, even with the loss of 25% to your maximum resistances and capping your armor at 60% damage reduction from physical. We still, with the build, feel relatively tanky. So you don't have to worry about getting one-shot using a Beast Cornered, so make sure that this is the option that you're going with. The reason we're saying a half-life is because we're running Marred Guard. You're going to gain 10% maximum resistance to all enemies, 20% armor, and increased barrier and fortified generation. Now, the reason this is so important, we explained how the fury generation works, especially with the starlight aspect. If we're not at half-life, we don't get back our fury, so that's why we need to stay at half-life with this. For your next one, we're going to be running Dual Threat. Casting a basic skill uses another equipped basic skill at the target, dealing 80% of its normal damage. That's the cool part about this perk. Whenever we cast Lunging Strike, we are now going to cast an additional basic skill, which is going to be Frenzy, at the target, and the Frenzy will do 80% of its normal damage. We do not even have to cast Frenzy, and it automatically casts it for us. And then the final one we're going to be running is going to be Accelerating. On a lucky hit chance, we have a small chance to generate your Chaotic Burst. Whenever those enemies are hit by a Chaotic Burst, it's going to reduce the active cooldowns by 0.5 seconds. In big groups of monsters, it just adds to the crazy increase to your cooldown reduction with this build. For your jewels and for your runes inside of your jewelry, just put in whatever is going to help you get to cap. You're going to be able to get cold, and you're also going to be able to get fire resistance inside your Paragon board. So you might want to be running something like shadow resistance, poison resistance, and then lightning resistance in here in order to hit cap. Really depends on where your gear is at and where your character is set to. There is no one size fits all. For the armor, you always want to run your rubies in here for extra strength. That strength is going to convert into a multiplier any of your core stats on whatever character you're playing are going to be increased to a multiplicative increase to your damage. So if you can fit this in and you have enough additive damage everywhere else, putting the gems in your armor is always going to be the best option for you. For the runes here, the first one we're going to be running is Cur Ke. This is going to summon your wolves every time that we cast 5 skills. And then we're going to be running Mani Zan. Your Lunging Strike is considered a mobility skill. So now every single time that we cast 3 Lunging Strikes, we're going to guarantee a crit and an overpower for our next skill. So that's going to be really important for making this build overpower, additional damage, much bigger multipliers. And then finally, for your consumables here, we're going to be running Soothing Spices, Redamine Buzz, and then Ancient Times. If your armor is low, you can swap this out for some additional armor here and you not run the maximum life, because we do have quite a bit of life. And because we're going to be stacking your maximum fury and we actually want to spend less fury, running your Elixir of Resourcefulness is a great option for you. Increased damage, less fury costs for your basic skills. So this is going to be the best option for you here. All right, let's break down the gameplay loop. You're going to start off by just holding down Lunging Strike. That's going to be the first thing. Then it's going to auto cast your Frenzy. You're going to use your Wrath of Berserker first, your Shouts, and then you're going to Ground Stomp in order to get your cooldown off of Wrath of Berserker. And then basically all you're going to do is just spam anything as soon as it comes up. You can look into a little bit of a rotation if you need to try and make sure that your Ground Stomp always comes off with Wrath of the Berserker, but you really won't need it too much, especially if you have a big group of enemies here. The Pain Gorger's buff, this is what you get to look for. When we use your Wrath of the Berserker, it's this little circle around the top of the enemy's head. That's how you know that your Pain Gorger's buff is active. So with this being said, we're going to hop into the gameplay loop so you can see how it goes. So you're just going to hold down Lunging Strike here, and then we're going to start with Wrath of the Berserker, and then you're going to use Ground Stomp, and then, as you saw, Wrath of Berserker just came right back up, and we're already doing hundreds of billions of damage. So all you're going to do is just hold down your buttons. If you're on a mouse and keyboard, then you just press all the keys at the same time as you're going. We're just going to hold down Lunging Strike. Then as everything resets, you're just going to hold that down and press them all. There's nothing else to it. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to follow anything along. Now, Lunging Strike has a range, so you can actually bounce around monsters and stuff as you go. This is really great for movement when you're going through the pits. You can just hold down the Lunging Strike button as long as you have enough fury, and you'll be able to get yourself from monster to monster, and you can move yourself around pretty quickly. Now, you saw in the very beginning of the video some bosses that we did where we changed up a couple things. We changed up your accelerating chaos perk, and we added in dual threat. Now, this is going to give you a 3-second cooldown, but it is going to guarantee you to crit and overpower, and it does a huge multiplier to your basic skills. So now when we go and attack, you're actually going to see that we will have a cooldown, and now we're actually going to have to use Frenzy. But the damage that goes up, as you see, we're already doing way more damage than we were before, but sometimes you're going to end up with no cooldown. That's why we just use this for bosses. We just did 400 billion compared to the 200 billion that we were doing before. So you can do a whole lot more damage, but on a single target, you're going to have some cooldowns, so you'll have a little bit of waiting time until it comes back up. That's where the endgame version is going to come into play for your pit pushing. We'll have a full variant that will need some mythics for that. This version is plenty strong. As you saw, we did a whole lot of damage. That's all I got for the Lunging Strike Barbarian. Hopefully you find this build fun. Let me know in the comments what you think and how far you push in the pits. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm live every night. I'd love it if you stopped by, said hi, theory crafted with me. Catch you on the clip side.